Right now, there's a parasite spreading across more than 30 states in America, and it can cause diarrhea so severe that doctors call it explosive. And here's the part that should really get your attention. Health officials just announced within the last few days exactly where it's coming from. It's tied to something millions of Americans eat every single week without a second thought. I spent hours digging through CDC reports, FDA advisories, and interviews with infectious disease doctors to put this together. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand this outbreak better than most people who've only seen a headline about it. I'm going to tell you what this parasite actually is, why it can fool your doctor's standard tests, who is genuinely at risk, which treatment actually works, and which so called natural cures are wasting your money. And I promise you this, the story of how humans first discovered parasites like this one starts in the 1600s with one very curious, very strange man in Holland. Stick around for that because it's one of my favorite pieces of medical history. I'm Dr. Northvale, and if you're new here, this channel is about giving you real evidence based health information without the fear mongering and without the sales pitch. So let's get into what's actually happening. The parasite is called Cyclospora cayetanensis. It's a single-celled organism, and it's a distant relative of Cryptosporidium, the parasite that famously contaminated Milwaukee's water supply back in the 1990s and sickened over 400,000 people. Cyclospora causes an illness called cyclosporiasis, and as of this month, the CDC has confirmed over 1,600 domestically acquired cases across 34 states, with more than 5,000 additional cases still being reviewed. That's already several times higher than the same period last year. About 9% of confirmed patients have needed hospitalization. Thankfully, no deaths have been reported. And here's the update that just broke. On July 16th and 17th, the CDC and FDA announced that a cluster of cases across Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia has been linked to shredded iceberg lettuce, sourced from a supplier in central Mexico and served at Taco Bell locations. The supplier, Taylor Farms de Mexico, has pulled that lettuce from the market. That's a big deal because in most outbreaks like this, investigators spend weeks or months chasing a source and never fully nail it down. This time, they moved fast. But and this matters, officials have been clear that this lettuce recall only explains one cluster. It does not explain why cases are up across the entire country this year. So there's still a bigger mystery here, and I'll come back to that. Now, before you panic about your produce drawer, I want to give you a piece of genuinely reassuring news because I think it gets lost in outbreak coverage like this. When someone is infected with Cyclospora, the parasite that comes out in their stool isn't contagious yet. It has to sit outside the body in soil, water, or on produce for about 1 to 2 weeks before it becomes capable of infecting another person. That means this illness essentially cannot spread from person to person. If you're taking care of someone who has it, you are not going to catch it from being in the same house, hugging them, or even helping them in the bathroom. Compare that to norovirus, which tears through households and nursing homes in days. Cyclospora just doesn't work that way, and that one fact alone should lower a lot of anxiety if someone in your family gets sick. So, how did we even figure out that microscopic parasites like this exist in the first place? Back in the 1670s, a Dutch fabric merchant named Antony van Leeuwenhoek, not a trained scientist, just an obsessively curious tradesman, started grinding his own glass lenses so precisely that he could see things no human eye had ever seen. He looked at pond water and discovered tiny swimming organisms. He called them animalcules, and today he's known as the father of microbiology. But here's the detail that gets left out of most textbooks. In 1681, Van Leeuwenhoek came down with a bad case of diarrhea, and instead of just waiting it out, he examined his own stool under his lens and described a small organism swimming around with what he called little paws. Historians now believe he had just become the first person in history to observe a human parasite, likely Giardia. The entire field of parasitology, the science protecting your family from this exact outbreak, arguably started because one man got curious about his own diarrhea. Cyclospora itself is a much more recent discovery. It wasn't formally identified in humans until 1979, and it wasn't even given its full scientific name until the 1990s, after a wave of outbreaks tied to imported produce forced researchers to take it seriously. So let's talk about how you'd actually recognize this if it hit you or someone in your family, because it does not behave like typical food poisoning. Ordinary bacterial food poisoning usually hits within hours and burns out within a day or two. Cyclospora is slower and, frankly, more annoying. Symptoms often don't start until about a week after exposure. And the hallmark signs are watery, sometimes explosive diarrhea, loss of appetite, real weight loss, cramping, bloating, gas, nausea, and deep fatigue. Fever is usually mild or absent. And here's the tell that doctors say separates this from a normal stomach bug. It can drag on for weeks, and it often follows a relapsing pattern. You feel better, you think you've beaten it, and then it comes roaring back. If that happens to you, that's a signal to get tested specifically for this parasite, not just treated for a generic stomach bug. Now, who is actually at risk of serious complications here? Young children, people with weakened immune systems, cancer patients, and the group I focus on most, older adults. Infectious disease physicians have pointed out that the real danger isn't the parasite directly, it's the dehydration from days or weeks of watery diarrhea. In an older adult or anyone managing a chronic condition, that fluid loss can spiral quickly into electrolyte imbalances, kidney injury, dizziness, and falls. And falls in elderly patients are not a small thing. A fall can mean a broken hip, a hospital stay, and a permanent loss of independence. That's why the hospitalization rate in this outbreak, running around 9 to 10%, is worth taking seriously, even though almost everyone eventually recovers. So, when should you actually call a doctor? Watery diarrhea lasting more than a couple of days, diarrhea that goes away and then comes back, or any signs of dehydration, dizziness, dry mouth, dark or minimal urine, confusion, a racing heart, or an inability to keep fluids down. In a frail or elderly person, don't wait it out. Call. Now, here's a part I find genuinely important because it can change how fast you get better. The moment a story like this hits the news, the internet fills up with natural parasite cleanse products: wormwood, black walnut, oregano oil, garlic, berberine, papaya seeds, clove. So let me be straight with you and grade these honestly the way I'd want someone to tell my own family. As of today, there is no published human study showing that any of these herbal remedies treat cyclospora infection in people. None. The CDC's treatment guidance does not list a single one of them, not even as an experimental backup option. Now, some of these compounds do have real science behind them, just not for this. Berberine showed activity against Giardia in a study from the 1970s, but Giardia is a completely different parasite. Artemisinin, derived from sweet wormwood, is a genuine Nobel Prize winning discovery. A2UU won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for isolating it, and it remains the backbone of modern malaria treatment. But that's for malaria, caused by an entirely different organism using a purified pharmaceutical extract, not tea. A few of these compounds have shown some activity against a parasite called Eimeria, which infects poultry and is Cyclospora's closest laboratory relative. So there's a plausible scientific thread here, but it's been tested in test tubes, cell cultures, and livestock, not in sick humans. Grade. Interesting. Worth researching, not proven, and not something to bet your health on. And here's why this actually matters for safety, not just accuracy. If a frail 80-year-old skips the proven antibiotic and spends 3 weeks drinking bitter herbal tinctures while the diarrhea continues, they're not choosing something neutral. They're increasing their real risk of dehydration, kidney injury, and a fall. Hydration itself, fluids, and electrolytes. That part of the folk wisdom is correct and genuinely helps. But a cleanse is not a substitute for treatment that works. So, what does actually work? The standard treatment is an antibiotic combination called trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, sold under brand names like Bactrim or Septra. The typical adult course is one double strength tablet twice a day for 7 to 10 days. It's been the standard of care for about 3 decades. It's inexpensive, it's available at any pharmacy, and most people with a healthy immune system start feeling significantly better within a few days. Two honest caveats. If you're allergic to sulfa drugs, the CDC is upfront that there's no equally effective alternative. Ciprofloxacin is a reasonable second option but less consistently effective, and nitazoxanide is sometimes used, but the evidence for it is thinner. And second, don't reach for over the counter antidiarrheal medication without checking with a doctor first, because in some parasitic infections, it can actually trap the organism inside you and prolong the illness. Here's the piece that could genuinely change an outcome for someone you love. Cyclospora is notorious for slipping past routine stool tests. A lot of standard lab panels don't even screen for it by default, and because the parasite sheds intermittently, a single stool sample can come back negative even when someone is actually infected. So, if you or a family member has suspicious symptoms during this outbreak, here's the exact sentence to say to your doctor. Given the current Cyclospora outbreak, can we specifically test for Cyclospora using a modified acid-fast stain or a stool PCR panel that includes it? That one sentence tells your doctor to order the right test instead of the default one, and it can save days of unnecessary suffering. Now, let's talk prevention because I have to correct a comfortable myth here. A lot of people assume I'll just wash my produce really well solves this. It doesn't, not reliably. Cyclospora clings tightly to produced surfaces, especially in the little crevices of bumpy fruit like raspberries, and standard washing, along with regular chlorine based sanitizers, does not reliably remove or kill it. This isn't new. Back in 1996, North America's largest cyclosporiasis outbreak on record was first blamed on California strawberries before investigators eventually traced it to imported Guatemalan raspberries. The FDA ended up banning fresh raspberry imports from Guatemala in 1998. That's the outbreak that taught researchers just how stubborn this parasite really is. So, what actually helps? Cooking. Heat kills Cyclospora, so leafy greens and herbs are safest when cooked rather than raw. During an active outbreak, favor whole heads of lettuce over pre-washed bagged salad mixes and discard the outer few leaves. Still wash your produce under running water. It helps somewhat, just don't rely on it alone. Sanitize cutting boards and counters and wash your hands before and after handling produce. And if you're traveling to places where this parasite is more common, parts of Latin America, South Asia, countries like Guatemala, Peru, Mexico, or Nepal, avoid untreated water and raw produce. And remember that chlorine treatment of water doesn't reliably kill this parasite either. Stick to bottled or filtered water. Now, the question everyone eventually asks, why is this happening at this scale right now? I want to give you the facts without spinning them either direction. In 2025, federal foodborne illness surveillance programs saw funding reductions and food safety agencies experienced staffing cuts, some of which were later reversed. A food traceability rule designed to help investigators trace contaminated food back to its source faster was delayed. Some experts have said this makes it harder to catch outbreaks early. Officials on the other side have pointed out that this year's investigation actually moved unusually fast, identifying a lettuce supplier and issuing a recall within weeks, which isn't typical. The honest answer is that no one has proven that reduced surveillance caused this specific outbreak to be bigger. What we can fairly say is that cyclosporiasis is chronically underdiagnosed and underreported in general. This year's numbers are running many times higher than last year across the entire country. Not just in the states linked to the lettuce recallee, and that gap between confirmed cases and real cases is exactly why knowing what to ask your doctor matters more this year, not less. So let me bring this together into something useful. If someone in your life is dealing with unexplained, lingering, or relapsing watery diarrhea right now, watch for dehydration, dizziness, dry mouth, dark urine, confusion, weakness, and push fluids and electrolytes. If they're on blood thinners like warfarin or have kidney disease or diabetes, make sure their doctor and pharmacist know their full medication list before starting antibiotic treatment. If symptoms drag on or come back after seeming to improve, ask specifically for cyclospora testing using that exact sentence I gave you earlier. In the kitchen, favor cooked greens over raw bagged salad during this outbreak and choose whole heads of lettuce when you can. And remember, you will not catch this from caring for someone who has it. If you want to check the latest numbers yourself, the CDC's cyclosporiasis page and the FDA's outbreak advisories are updated regularly, and foodsafety.gov tracks active recalls. I'll leave you with this. Over 340 years ago, a curious fabric merchant in Holland looked at the smallest, least glamorous part of being human. And by paying real attention, he opened a door that's still protecting families today. That's really the whole point of this channel. Pay attention, ask the right questions, and look out for the people around you who might not think to look out for themselves. If this helped you understand what's actually going on, subscribe and send this to the one person in your life who eats salad without a second thought. It might be the reason they stay home this summer instead of in a hospital bed. I'm Dr. Northvale. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.